This is a Sikha in Likutei Sichos Chelik Yud Zayin, the fourth Sikha to Parshas Emor. From Posik Usmachtem Litnei Hashem Elokeichem Shivas Yomim. In the Posik in this week's Parsha, where it talks about the Yont of Sukkot, this week's Parsha talks about Yom Tovim. One of them is Sukkot. Sukkot is 7 days. So the Posik says, Usmachtem Litnei Hashem Elokeichem Shivas Yomim. You should be happy in front of Hashem for 7 days, which is by Chag HaSukkos, which is written by Sukkot. So from that posik, lent of the Rambam learns as the Chag HaSukkos is given a Simcha Yisera, Mervi be'andre me'adis. That Sukkos there was a extra yontev, a special simcha, special joy, special simcha more than the other Yom Tovim in the Beis Hamikdash. Why in the Beis Hamikdash? Because the posik says you shall be happy in front of Hashem for 7 days. Where is it in front of Hashem? In the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, in the Beis Hamikdash there was a Simcha Yisera during Sukkos. There was a extra simcha more than the other Yom Tovim. The Zel L'Sheinem, the Rebbe quotes the whole Lashon of the Rambam. The Rambam says like this: Afa Pishakol Ameiret Mitzvah L'Smeach, and even though all the Yom Tovim is a mitzvah to be happy there, and as the pasuk says, V'samachta b'chagecha. The Rambam doesn't bring the pasuk here, but it says V'samachta b'chagecha. Every Yom Tov you have to be happy. Nevertheless, the Rambam says B'chag HaSukkos is hoysa b'mikdash yem simcha yisayro. During the Yom Tov of Sukkot in the Beis Hamikdash there was a extra simcha. Now, the word yom, which means a day of extra simcha, is a whole question. What does the Rambam mean with that word yom? The Order the Rebbe says there are different versions in this Rambam, but the point of the Rambam is very clear that even though all the Yom Tovim there's a mitzvah to be the simcha, Sukkot there was extra simcha in the Beis Hamikdash. Shenamar, in the quote this pasuk, it says, "V'samachtem b'nei Hashem Elokeichem shivas yomim." You should be happy in front of Hashem, which is the Beis Hamikdash, 7 days. Ketzad Yasim. Rambam said, what do they do? How do they do this? Erev Yom Tov Arishon, the day before the first day of Yom Tov, they would prepare the place, the Azorev, the Ezras Noshim, and they would make it that the women should have a gallery, a second floor. So they would fix this, prepare this. There were poles sticking out, and before Sukkot, they would put up the boards, put up the floor to make a place for the women upstairs, for the men downstairs. These shouldn't mix with these. It means the men and the women should mix. And they started being happy from the Motzei Yontev of the first day of Yontev. After the first day of Yontev, that night they started being happy. And the same thing happened every day in Chalamed. And the Rambam says how they did it. They did it with trumpets, with the Chalil, with the harps and everything. They did all kinds of instruments that they had, and that they did from the Motzei Yontev of the first day and every day of the Chalmei. Zogim Mefarshim, so some Mefarshim explain, and basically in the order the Rebbe says, who is that Mefarish? Mainly is the Rif Perlo in his explanations on the Sefer HaMitzvahs that Rebbe Sadia Gaon. He has a whole explanation there, so he writes like this: as from them, what the Rambam bring them, Postik Machtem Tnei Hashem Elokeichem Shivas Yomim. Al Smoker, if them was B'chag HaSukkos hoysa b'mikdash yem simcha yisero. Since that from the Posik was Machtem L'Tnei Hashem Elokeichem Shivas Yomim, the Rambam uses this as the source that in Sukkot there was an extra simcha. Ubifrat as a demont nit a simcha yisero, ad the simcha yisero at ashayches mit nisach hamayim simcha yisei sheva. The Rambam doesn't mention that this simcha, extra simcha they had, has to do with the pouring of the water, which is simcha yisei sheva. Is muchar, that proves the Rambam holds that the simcha yisei is not verbunden with nisach hamayim. That the fact that in the Beis Hamikdash they had a special singing throughout the Sukkot and the whole night, every night of Chalamed, they would dance and sing, which we know as Simchas Beis HaShe'eva, which means the Simcha that has to do with the drawing of the water, because there was a special mitzvah of Sukkot to pour water on the Mizbeach, which they didn't do a whole year. Whole year they only poured wine. Here they also poured also water, and they drew it at night. So we know that the whole Simcha that they had is Simchas Beis HaShe'eva, the simcha because of the pouring of the water, drawing of the water, and the next day they poured. But the Rambam doesn't mention a word about it. The Rambam says, why did they have the extra simcha? Because the pasuk says, "V'smachtem l'fnei Hashem Elokeichem shivas yomim." So that proves that the Rambam holds that this extra simcha is nit verbunden mit nisach hamayim. It's not no connection to the pouring of the water. And then it brings in Order 7 that the Rambam in a different halacha writes, "Shoyim aragdim," they used to dance the Chag HaSukkos in the days of Sukkos, which means it's connected to the Yont of Sukkot. Now, she's achi of simcha min ha-Torah was dar b'zayim Beis Hamikdash lifnei Hashem Elokeichem Chag HaSukkos als Yont. From the Rambam, it seems that why do they have this extra simcha? Because the Torah says you should be happy, Lifnei Hashem, which means in the Beis Hamikdash for 7 days. And that's a mitzvah of the Torah. So there's a mitzvah of simcha in our Torah, especially in the Beis Hamikdash on Sukkot, nothing to do with the fact that there was a special drawing of the water and a pouring of the water. Al Yontif. It says that the 7 days of Yontif, we should be extra happy. Neisev of the simcha was Davzaim B'chol Yontif, which is in addition to the simcha that has to be every Yontif. Uneich Chag HaSukkos Gufa and Sukkot itself, Bigvulin, outside of the Beis Hamikdash, you also had their simchas Yontif. In the Beis Hamikdash, you had an extra simchas Yontif because of the posik was Machtam Lefnei Hashem Lekechem Shivas Yomim. But the Rambam holds that has nothing to do with the pouring of the water and the drawing of the water. And those were the Mishnah ruft the son Simchas Beis HaSheva. How could he say that? How could the Rambam say that? If the Mishnah calls it Simchas Beis HaSheva. And the Gemara brings the Roiv and Posik who shaft the mind besos. And the Gemara quotes a Posik where it says, draw the water with joy. And this was the Simcha. So in the Mishnah, and according to the Gemara explains the Posik, it seems like this extra simcha and the dancing and singing that took place in the Beis Hamikdash is just connected to the drawing of the water. So the Rambam will learn, meintes as mitzad dem posik, but it's not an asmachte, that this posik is only an asmachte. The posik where it says, ushafte mein besosen, it says we draw water with simcha, that was only an asmachte when they had this extra singing and dancing 7 days. And they connected it in the Gemara to the drawing of the water, because there was a posik that says when you should draw water with simcha. So since they had the simcha anyway, so they connected it to the drawing of the water. That's called asmachte. Asmachte means it's like a hint, a remez. But when the simcha yisrael of Chag HaSukkos is mitzarev given, zusammen mit Nisach HaMayim. So since they had the simcha anyway, nothing to do with the drawing of the water. They had the simcha because it says since there's a posik that says draw water with simcha, and they did draw the water and they poured the water, so the chachamim were misaket, mitzarev, combined it together. The Farhei says nit simchas hasheva. That's why it's not called the simcha of the drawing. Adishiive, the simcha from the simcha, that the drawing of the water is the reason why there's a simcha. There's simchas beis hasheva, the simcha of the house, of the place of the drawing. The simcha mitzad Chag HaSukkos was come for in beis hasheva. It's the simcha that has to do because of Sukkot. Took place in the place of Beis HaSheva, but those is the Shem HaMokim Shayim Saknu Simcha. That's the place that they prepared for Simcha. Our 14th Rebbe says this is the Lashon of the Rambam. So this is the place. So the Chachamim combined it. Since they had a mitzvah to do the Simcha anyway, and the Pasuk says when you draw the water, do it the Simcha, so they combined it. And they called the Simcha of the place of the drawing. So l'chure, it's a chidush, it's a big chidush, the Ripala says, but it seems like from the Rambam very clear like that the simcha that they had in the Beis Hamikdash throughout the days of Sukkot was not because of the pouring of the water, the drawing of the water, it's because the Pasuk says a special mitzvah. We shall be happy in front of Hashem, which means in the Beis Hamikdash for 7 days. So we have to understand. L'chure is do Rambam mastirim, and it seems like Rambam contradicts himself in this halacha. Rama starts off by saying that from the Pasuk that it says you shall be happy in front of Hashem 7 days. From there we know that there is a chiyuv of simcha yasir, of extra simcha in the Beis Hamikdash. For how long? For 7 days. The Pasuk, if the source of the simcha is this Pasuk, in the Pasuk it says 7 days. But the funi muchach adesmana simcha skela eitan yom rishon shel Chag. So obviously, the days of Simcha include the first day of Yontif. It says you should be Simcha 7 days, and one of the 7 days is the first day of Yontif. And right after, in the same halacha, the Rambam says, that the Simcha started much of the first day, so there's only 6 days of Simcha, not 7. Even if there was no Shabbos in the middle, but there was no 7 days of Simcha. And the Pasuk says 7 days. Why didn't they have 7 days? Now, the time of them is with the Rambam Reichweite. Now the Rambam gives a reason why on Yontif itself you couldn't do it, but that doesn't answer the question that Rambam says. What is the reason the Rambam gives? Simcha zu eine deichel as a Shabbos leis Yontif. This Simcha does not push away Shabbos and Yontif, because the way the Simcha was, they used instruments. Shabbos and Yontif midarabonon, you're not allowed to use a musical instrument. So the first day of Yontif, they couldn't beat the Simcha, because if the Simcha was done through the instrument, you couldn't do it the first day. So the Rambam gives a reason why it wasn't done the first day. But he's haguf akasha, but that doesn't answer. That itself is akasha. If we would say that this extra simcha is not a special din that the Torah says, nor blaze that din that Rabbanon made, like everyone learns that this simcha is connected to the pouring of the water. Where does it say in the Torah that when you pour the water or when you draw the water for the pouring, you have to have a simcha? It doesn't say. So definitely the simcha is the Rabbanon. The Rabbanon decided to make a big simcha that isn't based on the pasuk. So here you could say. So according, if you would say that, is moving for was the Yontav Rishon in the Kenzain Simcha. We understand why the first day couldn't be. Why? Was a finally is given the way the Simcha was made. The Rambam says Acholil, the flute Makkah with hit Menagnim Bikiner, Beniblayim and Mitzvasayim. They had drums, all these kalim that they used. It's all the lotion of the Rambam. Anybody who had an instrument was able to use it, came to use it. So the Simcha is connected to an instrument. So if the Simcha is only a din Rabbanon, then we understand why they couldn't do it on Yontif, the first day Yontif. While the Chiv Simcha with the Rabbanon is nicht bekeach to deichas and the Misa for nutzing Klishir v'Shabbos Yontif. Because since the whole Simcha is the Rabbanon, and the Rabbanon made the Isur that you can't use the instrument, so obviously the Isur, the Simcha of Yontif cannot push away the Isur of using the instrument because the Simcha is only the Rabbanon. What's the Zeicha the Rabbanon? Using the Klishir is the Rabbanon. Not allowed to use the Klishir is the Rabbanon. The mitzvah of singing is the Rabbanon. So the Rabbanon said not to. Like you're not allowed to use the instrument, so that's why they couldn't do it. The Balder, we learned that the Simcha, you say it is at Sivim and not Torah, but since we're learning it, it's not that. It's not the Rabbanon. The Rambam says, the Posik says, it's a Posik. And the Posik teaches us, the way we're learning Kipshut Pshat and Rambam, teaches us that 7 days you have to have extra Simcha, nothing to do with the drawing of the water. It's a Din Deraisa. Now that we're in Din Deraisa, now we have a problem. Why wouldn't a mitzvah deraisa push away the Isser Rabbanon of using the instruments? The deraisa always pushes away the Rabbanon. And since the Simcha is a deraisa, so even on Yontiv, which the Rabbanon said you're not allowed to use the instruments, you still should do it. Because the mitzvah of Simcha, which the instruments was for, is a din deraisa. Especially that we have a cloud that not all, but a lot of the Isurim Rabbanon, which are called Shvus, which the Rabbanon made also, does not apply in the Beis Hamikdash. Beis Hamikdash, the Rabbanon's Isurim, many of the Isurim don't apply. Simchas Beis Hashayiv, they'll give them Beleis B'Mikdash. The whole Simcha that we're talking about was in the Beis Hamikdash. So Bechlal, the Isurim Rabbanon doesn't apply. So that's an additional thing. First of all, even if it would apply, Bechlal in the Mikdash, that you're not allowed to use instruments, but that's the Isurim Rabbanon, and the Simcha is a Chiv Deraisa. So the Raisa comes before the Rabbanon, so you should use it. Especially the Rebbe says that even the Rabbanon doesn't apply in Mikdash. Why? Because Ein Shvus B'Mikdash, the Mikdash has no Shvus. So that's one kasha we have to understand. If it's a Isa Deraisa, the way we learn Pshat and Rambam, with the Rif law learn Pshat and Rambam, why? And the Pasuk says 7 days. Why wasn't it on the first day? Also, we have to understand. Number one, what is the Mokif for Rambam? Where does the Rambam get? Rambam doesn't make up things. Rambam takes everything from Gemara, from Yerushalmi, from Tosefta, from Rises, from Teraskenim. He takes from there. He has a source. He doesn't make up his own dinim, especially dinim what happened then. Where we find someplace in the sources in Chazal this din? And in order 24, Rebbe says that the Rifpolo asked the Shaila, and Taki goes and trying to find the Mokin and Yerushalmi, find all kinds of things. So where does the Rambam get this from? Now there is a possibility to say maybe the Rambam gets it directly from the pasuk. Since the pasuk says "Usmachtem l'fnei Hashem Elokeichem shivas yamim," so look at the pasuk. So the pasuk says there should be extra simcha. So what are we looking at Mokkah for in Gemara Yerushalmi? Looking from the pasuk. So the Rebbe goes into the order 24. Can we darshan psukim? We could make the roshas of psukim. Can we after the Gemara was finished, learn out dinim from psukim, based on psukim? So he brings a Alter Rebbe, which it seems he does. But normally we assume that everything has to have a mokin chazal. The source has to be chazal. We don't go directly to the psukim. Where is there chazal, a place where it says that there's an extra simcha yesay that's supposed to be in the Beis Hamikdash, the 7 days of Sukkot? Second thing, Nochmer, go further. The pasuk is always not sivu of the simcha yesay in the Beis Hamikdash. Not only where is the source that this is what the pasuk means? Where is the source of Gemara? We have a, so to speak, a proof that the pasuk does not mean this. Why? The bald as the Rambam allein zogt in the Friedrich halacha, the Rambam himself says in the earlier halacha, their posik is farnumen of another limud. This posik is used for something else to teach us. We have a klal when the Gemara says we learn out from a posik a certain din. We can't learn out two dinim from the same posik. Has to be something extra, maybe another word, an extra thing. But from one posik, if the posik teaches you one din, we call it, it's already fanuman, it's taken up already. So the Rambam already used up this posik for a different din. What's the din? The Rambam writes, mitzvahs lulav, we talk about the mitzvah of the four kinds of the lulav, v'migdosh levade neitnei sebechol yom, v'yom meshivas miyachag. In the Beis Hamikdash, they used to take the lulav 7 days, all 7 days of Yom Tov. Shenemar, it says this pasuk, because the pasuk says, on the first day of Sukkot you should take, and take the din midaraisa that we take the lulav and the esrik only the first day. The fact that we take it all days of Sukkot is the rabbanon, but midaraisa it's only 1 day. Nevertheless, the Rambam says even midaraisa in the Beis Hamikdash you have to take it 7 days. Why? Because the pasuk says take the lulav. What the first day, and then the pasuk continues. That in front of Hashem, which is the Beis Hamikdash, this simcha that comes from the lulav should be 7 days. So the pasuk teaches a din already. The pasuk teaches a din that you have to take the esrog and the lulav in the Beis Hamikdash 7 days. So the pasuk is used up already. So how could the Rambam come here and say that this pasuk teaches another din? The din that in the Beis Hamikdash there's a chiyuv to have extra simcha and sukkos. Can't be. There is no marker to it, seemingly. And it can't even be that such a limud, because it's used up. Good. Weiter, schreibt the Rambam, then the Rambam continues. The Rebbe is going to bring a few pieces of Rambam, ask kashas in every piece, and then give the answer. The Rambam continues like this. Mitzvah l'harib is b'simcha. It's a mitzvah to do it more and more and more, this simcha. Not any person on Amhoretz, or any person who wanted, was really involved in the simcha. Elo, and he gives a list of different kinds of people that were involved in this simcha. Kedei lechachma Yisrael, we have to keep in mind what the Rambam says each word. Kedei lechachma Yisrael, which means the great chachamim among Yidden, Rosh HaYeshivas, the heads of the yeshivas, Sanhedrin, the members of the Sanhedrin of the High Court, Hachsidim, people who fell into the category of Chassidim, which means extra frum, very frum people, Haskenim, the Skenim. What's Kenim? So Bichlal we know, a Zokan, the Gemara says, a Zokan is Zeshakon Chochma, it's a Chochma. So what is the difference between Skenim and Gdei Lechachma Yisrael? A Zokan is also a Chochma. And he says Gdei Lechachma Yisrael. So what's Kenim? So there, Ben Nahora says, there must be 2 categories. And he gives an example, what is the possibility of the 2 categories? Ula, he said, maybe you could say that Zokan is a Chocham, but a Chocham that got his knowledge because he learned a lot. He's already older and he learned a lot. And Gdei Lechachma Yisrael means those that, not even because they're so old and they learned a lot. They're so smart. They be'etzem have a great head and they learn so smart. Whichever way, but there's 2 categories. There's a category Gdei Lechachma Yisrael, and now it's Kenim, and Anshe Maisem, people of good deeds, people who were very frum and did a lot of good Maisim Tevim. Heim Shoyim Ragdim, they are the ones that danced, Umesapkin, and they clapped, Umenagnim, and they sang, Umesamchin, and they made happy, the Migdosh, in the Beis Hamikdash, Avol Kol Ha'om, but all the other people from the nation, Va'anoshim, men and women, Kulam Boyim, leaders for the Shmeya, they only came to watch and to hear. So the Rambam says that not everyone did it, and he gave a few categories of which type of people did it. Under Mokir from the Halachis from the Mishnah. Where does the Rambam get? Like I said, the Rambam has to have a source of the Mishnah and Gemara or something. So the Mishnah says clearly, the Mishnah says that the Chassidim, which means the very pious people, from a people, Anshemaisa, people of good deeds, they were the ones that were dancing, and everyone else was watching. So the Rambam has a Mokir to what he says. That from Fasheba, you have to understand. Number one, the Fia now, based on what we said before, that the Rambam holds that this has nothing to do with the pouring of the water, be'emes. It's just because the Torah says a mitzvah that in the Beis Hamikdash you have to be happy 7 days extra. According to that, Aladas Rambam is the simcha chiyuv min ha'Torah al simchas yontif, that this simchas that they had in the Beis Hamikdash sukkahs is an obligation, a chiyuv from the Torah because of yontif, because of the simchas yontif. Unit adin the rabbanim tzadnis chamayim, and not because the rabbanim made a din because of the pouring of the water. According to that, why did not everybody do it? The Rambam said not everybody would do it. Not the Amoritz, not anybody wanted. All the people came to just look, watch, and hear. Why is it? Number one, wie kommt es, als soll eigentlich looking in Kiyum, von a mitzvah sesser, in a Torah, was ist gesagt worden, Stam. The Torah gives a mitzvah sesser. The Torah doesn't say for who it is. There are mitzvahs in the Torah for certain people, the mitzvahs for, right? Kayan mitzvahs for certain people. This mitzvah doesn't say for who it is. For everybody. So the Pasuk says, and it's a mitzvah midaraisa. Where do we find that the mitzvah midaraisa that's said in a simple way without any restrictions doesn't apply to anybody, everybody? Some people do it, some people not. And the second thing, who is the mocker of them? Where is the source for this? That not everybody was able to do it. So now we're asking a source even on the Gemara. Where's the source that the Gemara said that only they dance? Where does the Gemara get? Gemara also has to get it from a postic, from something that has a source. Where's the source for this? That's one question. That this is a contradiction to what the Rambam said before, according to the pshat that we said before in the name of the Rif law. A second kasha. In Mishnah, we just said in the Mishnah, when we quoted the Mishnah says, who danced? Chsidim v'an shemaisa. The real frumah people and dan shemaisa. And the Rambam is Meisiv, and the Rambam adds, at the Simcha am durchgeführt eich, he says, who did the Simcha? So he mentions a few more categories. G'dei lechachmi Yisrael, he added, the great people from the Chachamim, the Rosh Yeshivas, the Sanhedrin. Then he says Chassidim also, but that's in the Mishnah. And the Skenim, which he doesn't say in the Mishnah. Then he says An Shemaisa. So two of the, how many did the Rambam say? G'dei lechachmi Yisrael, Rosh Yeshivas, Sanhedrin, Chassidim, Skenim, An Shemaisa, 6 categories. 2 out of the 6 are written in the Mishnah. And the Rambam adds 4. And the Rabbi goes further. Nochmer goes further. The Gemara, see, this was the Mishnah. The Gemara on that Mishnah brings a Breise, wo es wird erzählt, was es haben demel gesagt, the Chassidim von Shemaise, that when the Chassidim danced, certain things that the Gemara says that they said, when the Shemaise danced, what they said, and the Gemara also says when the Baalei Tshuva, what the Baalei Tshuva said. So it comes out as haste, as I'm given drei Sugim. If you look into the Gemara, it wasn't just the 2 categories mentioned in the Mishnah. Chassidim and Shemaise. There was a 3rd category. Drei Sugim. Chassidim, An Shemaise, and Baalei Tshuva. The Rambam over is from the side. The Rambam like this. On one hand, Meisiv under the Sugim was very niederman to the Breise. He has more categories which the Breise did not mention. On the other hand, there's a Mashmai Baalei Tshuva. He skipped something that the Breise says, the Baalei Tshuva. Was very niederman to the Breise. So Rambam makes him, why does he do this? Where does he get this from? Or why does he do this? And he skips one and adds things which is not written. Where does the Rambam get this from? So we have 2 kashas here on this part. Number one, how could you make differences between people if it's a mitzvah says that I say? Some yes, some not. And where's the source of this? And why the Rambam? Where does the Rambam get these categories that he adds, which is not in the Mishnah, and a certain one he skips? Why is that? Weiter, sagt the Rambam. Then the Rambam continues. Hasimcha sheyismach odem. After he speaks about the simcha of Sukkot in the Beis Hamikdash, extra simcha, he says the simcha sheyismach odem b'asiyas hamitzvah v'avas hakel. The simcha that the person shows when he does a mitzvah and feeling the love of Hashem to him, shesiva b'hem that Hashem commanded to do the mitzvah. That's simcha aveda gdeilah. It's a big aveda. It's a special service of Hashem. Every simcha of every mitzvah. And he continues b'chol hamashpelatz, meaning when he lowers himself. Or make a gufa, and he makes himself, his body, he makes him very light, which means he shows him, he behaves like a nobody. So a person that does that for the sake of a mitzvah, hu hagodel hamachubet, he's great, he's honored, he's serving Hashem Yahweh. So the Rambam talks about simcha shemitzvah b'chlal, and he brings v'chein David melech Yisrael, David the king of Eden said when he brought the Oren. So it says he was mefazes u'mecharker. He danced in front of the Oren. And Michal Bashol asked him, how do you behave such? You're a king. How do you behave so stupid? You dance like a Meshuggah, so to speak. She said, like one of the maids. So he said, I'm making myself like this and I'm low my eyes because he did it for the sake of a mitzvah, for the Oren of the Eibishter when they brought the Oren. This is what the Rambam says. So Rambam finishes off that Simcha Shel Mitzvah is so great that you have to lower yourself. And if you lower yourself, it's something special and it's a big Aveda. That from Vashem we have to understand here also. Favos bring the Rambam the minyan actually in Hilchos Lulav, behemshach to the Simcha Yisrael from Chag HaSukkos. This inyan that by every Simcha Shel Mitzvah you have to have Simcha Shel Mitzvah, and it's a big Aveda and all the details that he brings. Why does he bring it here? In connection, right after he speaks about the Simcha of Sukkot. Now, at first glance, we have an answer. Since he's talking about Simcha of Yontev, he already adds general Simcha. So he says, I feel Leib mikavanos, I feel Leib will say this pshat. It's a mitzvah of Zan Halacha from the Simcha to Noch Halacha of Simcha. He wants to combine this halacha of Simcha Shel Mitzvah to other halachas already before that of Simcha, but there is Gedar bring in Hilchas Yontev. He should have brought it in Hilchas Yontev, Perik Vov, after halacha Chov there. Why? Was his number one for them. There the Rambam talks about Simchas Yontev. So there, Hilchas Yontev comes before Hilchas Lulav. So usually when you want to bring something, you have two choices. You always bring it the first chance. So that's number one first. Number two, a Simcha Klolisya. He said there it's a Simcha, which is all the Yom Tevin. See, the Simcha he talks about here, and Behemshech to that, he brings the Simcha Shel Mitzvah. Here it's about a Simcha that's very limited to the 7 days of Sukkot. Over there he talks about Simcha Shel Mitzvah in a broader form. So if you want to talk about a broader thing of Simcha, by Simcha of every mitzvah would fit more there. The main thing is, the third thing, see minyan ha-Simcha dort, retzich, wegen Simcha b'avedas Hashem b'chlal, punkt v'do. Actually over there, he talks, at the end, after Simchas Yontev, he talks, when the gay Simcha b'chlal, when you serve Hashem. So over there it would be more fitting to say that the Simcha Shel Mitzvah, how important that is. Why does he bring it here? The fun mashmer from that way seems a Simcha Shel Mitzvah b'chlal, but a shaycha to the Simcha Yisrael from Chag HaSukkos. That this mashmer seems that the Simcha of a mitzvah b'chlal, the Rambam says, is connected to the Simcha Yisrael, the extra Simcha that they did on Sukkos in the Beis Hamikdash. But why is it connected to that? That's a special mitzvah of Simcha in the Beis Hamikdash on Sukkos. Why is the Simcha Shel Mitzvah connected to that? So we have many kashas, and in this case, very strong kashas. Each kasha is a strong kasha, and you'll see what the Rebbe is going to answer. The beer calls that. The explanation is like this. The mitzvah the Rambam brings them posik is machtum fnei Hashem alakechem shivas yomim al tzmoker of the Simcha Yisei b'Chag HaSukkos. This that the Rambam brings the posik is machtum fnei Hashem alakechem shivas yomim. That is the source for the Simcha Yisei, the extra Simcha in Sukkos. So normally we learn, as we learned till now, that the pshat is this is a chiyuv in this posik. The posik comes to tell us this din that in the Beis Hamikdash for 7 days of Sukkos you have to be extra Simcha. That's how we learn. It's a chiyuv midaraisa from this posik. When we have kashas, how come it's only 6 days? How could one day be missing? And all the other kashas we had. So the Rebbe says that's not the pshat. When he brings them posik, meint er nicht zu sagen that the Torah sagt a chiyuv neisik. It doesn't mean that the Torah is giving us an additional obligation. Al Simchas Yontev, on top there's a mitzvah Simchas Yontev. Now there's a new obligation in the Beis Hamikdash and Sukkos. The chiyuv for Simchas Yisei b'Chag HaSukkos, the Torah is adding something, another thing on top of Simchas Yontev. That's how we learn till now. No. Nor what does the Rambam mean? It means like this. Ibal the Torah is madgish dem chiyuv Simchas Yontev b'Chag HaSukkos of Beis Hamikdash. Meri baliyam tevim. And this is really, this posik is not teaching us that. This posik is not teaching us anything new. The posik is just telling us that 7 days you have the Simcha. Which Simcha? Simchas Yontev. Okay. But the Torah tells us the din of Simchas Yontev by Sukkos more than by the other Yom Tov. By Sukkos, the Torah makes it much more clear. The Torah says, "V'samachtem lifnei Hashem alakechem shivas yomim," and add, "Be happy in front of Hashem 7 days." Chosh meveishen chiyuv Simchas Yontev v'samachtem b'chagecha. We already know from another passage where it says, "V'samachtem b'chagecha, be happy Yontev." We know there is a din of Simcha. Comes the Torah and repeats that din. All the Torah is doing, repeating the din of Simcha. But why is it repeating it? Repeating it means the Torah wants to stress it. So because the Torah stressed by Sukkos Dafke, extra stress of Simchas Yontev, and the extra stress is in the Beis Hamikdash because it says Lifnei Hashem Elkechem. Der Far is Hoysa, hat sich geführt in the Shivas Yomim b'Mikdash in Simcha Yisrael. Not that there is an obligation. It's interesting how the Rambam writes the Loshen. If you look at the Rambam's Loshen, he says that in the Beis Hamikdash there was an extra Simcha the 7 days during Sukkot. What do you mean there was a Simcha? The Rambam tells us halachas. Why didn't the Rambam say halacha? That in the Beis Hamikdash on Sukkot there's a chiyuv. You have to have an extra Simcha. Chayavim b'Simcha Yisrael b'Beis Hamikdash is Sukkot. Rambam just tells us as a fact. The fact is hoyso. Because the posuk says therefore there was extra Simcha. This is what the Rambam is trying to tell us. The posuk is not telling us that the posuk is mechayev, gives us a new obligation, a new mitzvah. The posuk is, the Rambam is saying, because the posuk stresses Simchas Yontev, which is the normal Simchas Yontev, nothing extra, but since by Sukkot it's written extra, and the Torah writes it, Lifnei Hashem Elokechem, dos hot aruz gerufen, that brought about given that this is how they behaved. When devils, the Simcha Yisera and the Simcha Yontif Gufa. It's not a new mitzvah over the Simcha Yontif. What we're saying is that the Simcha Yontif itself was stressed much more in the Beis Hamikdash during Sukkot. Mitzad Had Gosh and the mitzvah Aklolis for Simcha Yontif, because the general mitzvah of Simcha Yontif, the Torah stresses it extra, mentions it again, not to teach us a new din. And simple reason, you can't teach us a new din. Because the pasuk is used up for a different din, as we said before, used up for the mitzvah to tell us that in the Beis Hamikdash you take the rule of 7 days. So it's not teaching you a new din. It's just repeating, telling you the same din that you have to be Beis Hamikdash 7 days. So the new din that teaches us, that's the din of lulav. But the pasuk shot in the psukim is, be happy 7 days. So all of this is telling you, be happy Simchas Yontif. But since the Torah stresses it, so therefore in the Beis Hamikdash, the people, the Chachamim, felt a greater simcha, and that's why they danced even more. Und das meint der Rambam mit dem, was schreibt, the zwei halachas weiter. And that's why, this is what the Rambam means. 2 halachas further, the Rambam writes these words. Mitzvah laharbes besimcha zu. It's a mitzvah to be more, to do more in this mitzvah. What does it mean in this simcha? You should add in this simcha. What do you mean add to this simcha? There's a mitzvah to add. So, Posher, you learn, he talks about simcha beis hasheva, and he says it's a mitzvah to dance more by Simcha Yisasheva. The Rebbe learns, no, Simcha Zu means the Simcha Yontif. Es meint nicht aber so der Mitzvah v'chiv and Simcha Yisasheva. It doesn't mean there's a separate mitzvah of an extra Simcha, Sukkis and Beis Hamikdash. Nor in der mitzvah von Simcha Yontif Gufa is do ad Gosh Sofer. It's a mitzvah laharbes in the Simcha Zu, the Simcha which the Torah gave us for Yontif. So on Sukkos, there's a mitzvah to add to the Simcha, which means it's a mitzvah to be more careful with the mitzvah of Simchas Yontif. I'll just use an example. The Rebbe doesn't give it. I don't think he says it here. We say in the Agode, there's a mitzvah at Pesach night to talk, mitzvah Yisipur B'tzias Mitzrayim. Then we say in the Agode, Kol Amarba L'Sapur B'tzias Mitzrayim, Harei Ze Meshuvach. What does that mean? There's a new mitzvah, L'Harbes B'tzias Mitzrayim. There's one mitzvah, Sipur B'tzias Mitzrayim. It's a good thing to do that even more. Same thing here. It's a mitzvah Simchas Yontif. Sukkos, it seems the posek is madgish, so therefore the Simcha of Yontif is a good thing that you should be even more madgish that Simcha. But not a new mitzvah. Al Pisreh is moving for what Simchas B'Sashet is not Nideicha Yontif. Now we understand why that Simcha doesn't push away Yontif. The kasha was, Chotch as the Simcha is verbunden mit dem posek was machtem mit Nei Hashem Elokeichem Shivas Yomim. Even though the posek says that you should be happy for 7 days. So, 7 days, how could you not do it on the first day Yontif? And the reason is because it's not Deicha Yontif, it doesn't push away Yontif. But it's a mitzvah that I said, no, there's no extra mitzvah that I said. Und durch dem Marbe sein besimchas und mekaim the mitzvah sesa for simchas Yontif bechlal kanal. And not only that, when you do this, you mekaim a mitzvah that I said. Not a special mitzvah. There is a mitzvah that I said, simchas Yontif. And if you dance, the Mekayim the mitzvah Simchas Yontif. Sukkos, what the Inyan was, the Hanhogya was, that they stressed more the Simchas Yontif. So why not the first day? Because it's not Deicha. Why is it not Deicha? So we understand why. The Baldaber says, talking Chiyuv Miyuchad Menatayr of the Simcha Yisera, since the Torah didn't say, B'dafke, there's a Chiyuv to have this extra Simcha. And the mitzvah says, for Simchas Yontif is Mekayim, Echon the Simcha Yisera, to fulfill the mitzvah of Simchas Yontif, you don't have to have the extra Simcha. You don't have to have the dancing and the music and everything, just being happy. You can't be Deicha the Isser the Rabbanan. If it would be a special mitzvah deraisa, you could say it pushes away the Isser the Rabbanan of using clay share, using instruments. But this is not the mitzvah Yirmakayim. Elamai, the extra in the same mitzvah. So since you're Makayim the mitzvah Simchas Yontif, any way that you do, you sit in the house and you dance and you sing, you're Makayim the mitzvah. Elamai, we want to be Mekayim the extra. That's not the extra chiyuv. If it's not a special chiyuv, how could it push away the isur of using a clay shir? And the Rebbe adds another interesting word. The meat is eichmuven for what the Rambam learned. This also explains why the Rambam learns as erev yontav erishon hoyimesaktim emigish mokem l'noshim. That when did they build this gallery, this place for the women? Erev yontav. That's what the Rambam writes. Chochas from Pashtas Loshna Mishnah is mashmem what is misaktim given b'mitzoy yontav erishon shalchag. If you learn the Mishnah where the Rambam takes it from, it seems that they did it Motzei Yontif. Because the Mishnah says that they would start at Motzi Yontev, and it says they would erect and make this place for the women. Is mashma that it was done on Chalamed, Motzi Yontev. The Rambam changed. Why did the Rambam change it? Very simple. But yes, as if there's Simcha Yisera, is talking Chiv Miyuchad and Aterik, now since to have the Simcha Yisera, this extra Simcha, there's no special Chiyu, as we said before. Wie kämen zu Libir Deiches ein Isra Asiyas Malacha b'Chelamed? How can we do Malacha on Chelamed? We'll push away the Isra b'Chelamed. So if it's a Chiv that I said, you should push away. So maybe the Taka made it Chelamed. But since there is no Chiv for this, and this Chalamed, you can't work. So that's why the Rambam says it must have been that it was done before. The Iber learned the Rambam, what has get on Erev Yontif. Rambam says it's done Erev Yontif. The Mishnah is mashman like that. So the Rebbe brings in order 43 in the Sefer Shorek Nesach, he explains that he learns Pshat in the Mishnah. First the Mishnah says when it started, and then the Mishnah goes back to Erev Yontif, so to speak. Whatever it is, but what makes the Rambam learn that way different than the simple Pshat in the Mishnah? Because he can't learn that they did it Motzi Yontif Chalamed, because they were not allowed to do Melach Chalamed. Elamai, it's a mitzvah, but this Yurietz the mitzvah of Simcha without this. So they did it Erev Yom. Al Pizeh is moving the Azei Shaykh as in the Piyum from the mitzvah stomis and Gevech looking like Pashijan Asugim Bayim. This explains the other question. We asked the question, how could it be in a mitzvah that there should be difference in who does it? A mitzvah is for everybody. Now we understand it. The Simcha Yisera is not Chiv B'Fnei, since this extra Simcha is not a separate Chiv that Torah made. Nor Ayisof Evad Goshi Yisera in Chivuv mitzvahs from Simchas Chag and Sukkot. It's just an expression of love for this mitzvah of Simchas Yontev and Sukkot. Mitzadem, but the Simchas Mer Mutgish and Posek now because the Simcha of Yontev, the regular mitzvah of Simchas Yontev, is more stressed by Sukkot. That's why this Simcha Yisera comes, but not because it's a special din for itself, which means it comes because of the feeling of wanting to show the love for the mitzvah of Simcha. Oh, so if it comes only as a result of your own feeling, is es in ganzen totally believe in Eifen Regesh Odom. So it's totally in your heart, how a person feels. If people are feel the mitzvah, how much a person feels to show the love for the mitzvah. Therefore, like this, the Gresser Rebbe those on the higher level, since they really felt the love for the mitzvah, because this is not a mitzvah for itself, this expressed the love for the mitzvah. So since they really felt it, that's why they were able to dance. But other people, men, women, they didn't feel that much. So their extra simcha came out by standing and watching the Chachamim dance. But we see that that's why it's possible, different levels in doing this, because it's not a mitzvah to do this. If it's a mitzvah to do this, everyone the same. It's the expression that everyone had to the mitzvah, which showed the chvivus of the mitzvah. Like them, based on this, and the Simcha Yisera is not Chiv in Atayra nor Saisofa mitzvah the Simcha Yontev. Since we just said that this is not a special Chiv of Simcha Yisera, but it's only an addition to the regular mitzvah of Simcha Yontev. Was is Tluya and Hergesh Odom b'Chvivus mitzvah, so it depends on the feeling of how much you love the mitzvah. That when they verstehen, this will explain number one, that Tam was the Allah Sugin. That's why we say that these different categories of people did it. What's negated to go? It should have said this is a mitzvah and finish. Why does negate to know this category did this category? Besides the question we asked before, where the Rambam gets the category, but let's say the categories are there. Why is it important to know that they're different? This category, very simple. Because each category has a maila. So each one expressed his feeling differently. Since this is not a mitzvah that you have to do, it's a mitzvah only. It's an inyan only of expressing your feeling. So once to say all categories of people who have different feelings, express a different way, they are the ones that did it. So it's kedait, you have to mention the categories. Because then, if it wouldn't be totally in Chavivas mitzvah, in the feeling it's just a real mitzvah, then what's the difference? Categories? All these, the mitzvahs. But since it's only an expression of how you love the mitzvah of Simcha, so he says, yes, different categories because they're different way of expressing the love. And the second thing what we'll do now is we'll find the moker, the source as the alo the sugim sich mishtaken nasis mitzvah. Where does the Rambam take this? That all these categories all participated in the mitzvah. Where's the moker? He said not the moker. The Mishnah, the moker in the Mishnah only says two chassidim v'anshemaisa. That's all. And the Rambam adds four more categories. And as we said, in the third category that's in the Gemara, the Rambam skips. We'll answer that too. But now we'll understand where the Rambam gets it from. And this is a made chapa the Rebbe has. It's mamish brilliant. The Gemara in Bavli on Yerushalmi, blank bishmom, the Gemara, which includes Bavli and Yerushalmi, brings the names nor etlachatanoim, names of a few tanoim that participated. In the Zelt, wie sie haben sich geführt, oder was sie haben gesagt, bei Simchas HaSheva. And the Gemara picks a few names and mentions what these people, how they behaved, what they did by the Simchas HaSheva, and or what they said when they celebrated the Simcha. Now, the Rebbe says like this: for sure, all the Tanoim that were alive at that time participated. There's no question about it. And for sure, many said different things when they did it. So why does the Gemara only pick these few? But those what the Gemara tells to is the Tanoim, the fact that the Gemara picks to mention by name only these few, is not more and not less. See, if he would mention one, we could say, okay, he picks an example. If he wants to mention all, he would have mentioned, the Gemara would have mentioned all, many more. The fact that we mentioned only these, why? Why only these? Not less, not more. So we could say that these names, these people, they contain all categories of Simchas HaSheva. Everyone is a category for himself. From the Simcha said of these people who actually did it, because these people who represent different categories, they are the ones that have this feeling, and each one has a different feeling because he's a different category, he has a different way of serving Hashem. So that's the reason why the Gemara brings these names, because these names represent the different categories. And as the Rebbe will explain, what are the categories that these people represent? Exactly the categories what the Rambam says. The extra 4 that the Rambam says, so Chassidim Ashemaise, the Rambam doesn't have to look for a mokin. The Gemara, the Mishnah says, Chassidim Ashemaise. That the Rambam also mentioned. But the other 4 the Rambam takes from these 4 names that are mentioned in Gemara. Who are the 4 names? Gemara looked like this. Omer Rabbi Shua Chananya said something. He said, Rabbi Shua Chananya, remember the name. When we were happy, when we danced, when we did celebrate the Simchas HaSheva, we didn't taste the taste of sleeping because we didn't go to sleep. Throughout the whole night we danced. You have to sleep a little bit. So we used to doze off. Each one laying on the shoulder of his friend would doze off. So the Gemara mentions by name the Shua Chananya. Was it the Ma'idam Yechad of Shua Chananya was to them to tell the Gemara? What's so special about the Shua Chananya that Gemara mentioned his name? We said before the Gemara obviously mentions these names because they represent a category. Which category of Simchas HaSheva does the Shua Chananya represent? What is he? So the Rebbe says in a different Gemara, the Gemara says, that the Shua Chananya had dialogue with the elders of Athens. They were goyim, but they were great scholars. And he won over them, which means he was a very, very great chacham. The Gemara also says, as far as Istalkus from Shua Chananya before Shua passed away, so the chachamim, the Yiddish chachamim, asked them, "Might have a apikursim. What's going to happen now when the apikursim come and ask us questions? Till now, you were there to answer because you're so great. But now we don't have someone like you. What are we going to do?" As again, he answered them by using the posik of the Eitzam Ibonim Nisrach Chachmosim. If there's no advice in the children, if Yidden don't have someone who has the real Chachmeh, then their Chachmeh will get ruined. In other words, if there's nobody to answer, the Eibush will make them no one will ask. Ibo is saying another posik he quoted that Yaakov said to Esav, Nisav and Elcha, I'm going to travel and I'm going to go across you, which means that it's Zek and Zek, which is the same idea, that one across the other, meaning when there is someone to answer, there is someone to ask. If not, not. What do we see from here? From them Zet and Rav Shua Chananya is given from the Greste from Chacham Yisrael, from the biggest ones from the Chachamim. There were many Chachamim in his time, and he's the one that stands out. So this teaches us, and from them learn the Rambam Arois, that the Rambam from here learns as Gdei Chacham Yisrael. So that's where he gets the category of Gdei Chacham Yisrael from the fact that the Gemara brings the Shua Chananya. Second thing, Omro of Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Kishoy Sameir Basimcha Sheva, Yonait Rab Shimon Gamliel, Basimcha Sheva will take and throw things. The Gemara tells what he did and mentions his name. What's so special about him? He's another category. But the Tzelt Gemara tells us that Rab Shimon Gamliel is Rab Shimon Gamliel Nossi Sanhedrin. Shimon Gamliel was the head, the Nossi of the Sanhedrin. And because the Rambam's Loshen, what's the Sanhedrin? Sanhedrin Gdeilo when Yonam Shiva Vechad. It says the Sanhedrin Gdeilo, the top highest court, has 71 people. Hagodol b'chochma shevakulam, the greatest chochma amongst them, Yeshiva Neisei Reish Aleim. We make him the head. V'hu Reish Yeshiva. Rambam refers to the Nossi of Sanhedrin as the Reish Yeshiva. V'hu Shekeri Neisei Chacham Nossi b'chomokim. He's called the Nossi. The Nossi is the Reish of Sanhedrin. What's the Nossi? The head of the Sanhedrin. And who was the head of the Sanhedrin? Was Shimon Gamliel. From them named the Rambam at the Sanhedrin. From that we take that Rambam takes that the Sanhedrin took part because Shimon Gamliel is from the Sanhedrin. But now one might ask, but the Rambam also calls him Reish Yeshiva. So maybe from here we take out the fact that the Rosh Yeshivas were happy with Simchas Sheva. Why does we say Sanhedrin? Because the Rambam says Rosh Yeshiva separately. So obviously there are two things here. And Rosh Yeshiva we know from a different person. So Mamela, this must mean the fact that he was a member of the Sanhedrin. He happened to be the head of the Sanhedrin, but he was a member of the Sanhedrin. So we see that Sanhedrin participated in the dancing. The third thing, the Gemara says, Omru olav al Hillel Hazokim. They said about Hillel, and the Gemara refers to him Hillel Hazokim. When he was happy with Sheva, he said certain things. Now, the Gemara is Medayik it's answer from Hillel Hazokim. Since the Gemara especially calls him Hillel Hazokim, so many places when we bring Hillel, we don't call him Hazokim. Why does the Gemara refer to him here as Hazokim? He's moving and does fire in the minion. Tax to teach us something in this union. What when Hillel danced is representing Skenim. He was a Zokim. From here, the Rambam takes that also Skenim did. So we know what the Rambam takes. We know what the Rambam takes Sanhedrin. We know what the Rambam takes in of Skenim. Now, there's a fourth thing he said, Rosh Yeshiva. Now, in Yerushalmi, wer zugegeben noch ein Yerushalmi, there's another name mentioned. Ben Yehitzodek, he used to pride himself in his jumping. He would jump in a special way to entertain and make happy. But the lotion there is that Ben Yehitzodek would pride himself with his jumping. Since we said that the stories of the different people is written in the Gemara by name to teach you something, so obviously he wants to teach us, so we have to know who he is in order to learn from him who he was. Now it doesn't say it says Ben Yehitzodek. So it must be must be that Ben Yehitzodek was somebody in the time of Simch B'Sashev, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, that we know about him. Because if it's trying to teach us, look at who he was and you learn out from him, so it has to be someone that we know. So who is this Ben Yehitzodek? So the Rebbe says, when we have the list of the Tanoim, we find a person called Reb Shimon Ben Yehitzodek. That's the person. Now, when the Geir to Reb Shimon Ben Yehitzodek, you don't find anywhere in Shas or anywhere where the Chazal tell us something special who he was. See, the other ones we know, Hillel was the Azokan, this was the Leil Chachmei Yisrael, this Sanhedrin. What's so special about Reb Shimon Ben Yehitzodek that we should learn that this category of people like he was? Must be that his name teaches us something. What was his name? Rabbi Shimon. That's his name. So Rebbe, when it comes to talking about the description, the title, Rebbe, steht in Tosefta, it says in Tosefta, if someone has Talmidim, it doesn't matter if you have Rosh Yeshiva, if you have Talmidim, that's when you call them Rebbe. Das heißt, as Reb Shimon ben Yehitzodek ben Rosh Yeshiva. So it comes out just by knowing his name, he was a Rosh Yeshiva. When the food is the Yechocha for Rambam, that's what the Rambam proves. A Rosh Yeshiva is Rosh Yeshiva also did. So now we have all categories. Chassidim and because the Mishnah says clearly. Then we have Reb Shimon Hanania teaches you in the Gdei Chachmei Yisrael. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel is Sanhedrin, Hillel is Kenim, and Reb Shimon ben Yehitzodek is Rosh Yeshiva. Now L'chura came a fragment of them, but this last thing is not so simple. You could ask. Wie kann man sagen, at the time, what the Yerushalmi the month of Shimon Yitzodik? Is it was an Rebbe? How can we say that the reason the Yerushalmi mentions his name? So we should know that he was a Rosh Yeshiva, and to teach us the category of Rosh Yeshivas. If that would be, it should have said his name. How do we know he was a Rosh Yeshiva? Because his name was Rabbi Shimon ben Yitzodik. The Yerushalmi doesn't even mention his name. Basically, Yerushalmi do al Asar here, Ruftin Gor ben Yitzodik, or Nit Reb Shimon ben Yitzodik. It doesn't even call him ben Reb Shimon. And we're saying the whole reason it's written here is to teach us that he was a Rabbi, he was a Rosh Yeshiva. When the mission, so the Gemara Avada should have mentioned his name and say Rabbi, then we would learn from it. The teretz of them also so brilliant. The teretz is like this. The Yerushalmi says that not what he did, but how he prided himself. He used to pride himself with his jumping. He prided himself with his jumping. So we're talking about something that he himself did. When you talk about your own miles, you have to speak in such a way. If you speak about yourself, you can't call yourself with a title which could bring you to Gaive, or at least other people would think you're a Gaive. He used, when he spoke about it, because it says he prided, he would say, I'm jumping fine. How do you think he called himself? That Shimon ben Yitzodik is jumping in a special way. So he called himself ben Yitzodik. When you call yourself just by the name of your father, because who am I? I'm nothing. But you can't call himself like that. Once in a different place, once he was speaking about himself, that he did something and they accepted it, fill it. So he said, if Bezakai wouldn't pick up his head, then this wouldn't happen. He didn't call himself Erotzichnit. Angerufen mit einem eigenen Namen. They didn't say, if not Rabbi Yochanan Bezakai, why? Nor Menit al Zazun. He called himself as a son from his father. The Shaykh's and Fotis Namen. So the same thing here also. The reason that says it's the story with Ben Yitzoda, because Yerushalmi meant, like, I'm telling you what he said, what he did. So I can't call him Reb Shimon ben Yitzoda, because if we're talking about what he said, he couldn't call himself that. So we're calling it by his name the way he called it. But you look into it. And we have to wait till the Rebbe, 1,000 years later, came and looked into it and said his name was Rabbi Shimon ben Yitzodik. And since it was Rabbi, the Mele we know he had Talmidim, and if, like it says in Tesef, if you have Talmidim, you call Rabbi, the Mele Asim is Rosh Yeshiva, and that is the Moker, but the Rambam says that the category of Rosh Yeshivas also danced by Simchas Yeshiva. The only question that we're left now is, why doesn't the Rambam mention Bali Tshuva? Since in the Gemara it says 3 categories, the Mishnah says Chidim Hashemaise, and the Gemara adds what Bali Tshuva said, and that one the Rambam skips. So the Rebbe said the time for what the Rambam rechnet with Bali Tshuva, why doesn't come Bali Tshuva? So like this. The Rambam learns that the Braise is not Meisiv of the Mishnah. When the Braise says Bali Tshuva, it's not adding something to the Mishnah. The Mishnah is saying Chassidim Hashemaise, it's adding Bali Tshuva. Nor is Mefarish Umefaret, Kederes HaBraises, Kederech HaBrais, das versteht the Mishnah Bekitzer. We know the Mishnah writes Bekitzer. The Braise explains it. The Braise is explaining something of the Mishnah, which means der Suk Chassidim, was steht in der Mishnah, the Braise is explaining when the Mishnah says Chassidim Hashemaise, so in Chassidim is Kelo Sai Chassidim Befrat and Bali Tshuva. You could have regular Chassidim and Bali Tshuva, and it's all included in Chassidim. So it's not a separate category. What's the pshat that Bali Tshuva are included in Chassidim? And the Rebbe Ozil Shitose, the Rambam goes according to his own opinion. And this is like this. Rasha touched in that Gemara when it talks about Simchas Yeshiva, it's a Chassidim Hashemaise. Rasha says, what's a Chassid? Kol Chassid av a Chassid Mikor. A Chassid refers to a person who is originally a great. He's a tzaddik from the beginning. In other words, a chassid is complete opposite of a Baal Tshuva. A chassid, according to Rashi, means the one that is from beginning on great. Well, if he's there, kemenit lenin as is keloich Baal Tshuva. According to Rashi, you can't say chassid includes Baal Tshuva. But we're not talking about Rashi. We're talking about the Rambam. Oh, but the Rambam paskin in Hilchos Deis. The Rambam in Hilchos Deis says like this: who is a chassid? Doesn't say like Rashi, chassid is somebody who's a chassid miyakor, someone who was originally great. Someone is careful very to the extreme. Someone goes, not only he's in the middle way, he goes more to an extreme in goodness. He's called a chassid. But Baal Tshuva could be that too. As a Zaha Noge can sein, sei by a Tzadik the Chosid Mikore, and sei, the Adra Babiki by about Shuvah. So according to the Rambam, the word Chosid just means a person who's very frum. Could be a Tzadik, and he's very frum to the extreme. Could be about Shuvah also. He became about Shuvah, and now he's very frum and he's the extreme. And Adra that ever says, by about Shuvah, it's even more Shaykh that he goes to the extreme, because before he was the other side, now he's going to the extreme. The Rebbe learned that, therefore, Rambam learns, as Chassidim, Shebe Mishnah, maintain Bali Tshuva. When it says Chassidim in the Mishnah, it includes Bali Tshuva. Mahai time with the Monti, the Rambam Nasu Bali Tshuva Bezunda, that's what the Rambam does not mention that category of Bali Tshuva separately. No Shreit Chassidim Stam, Shreit Chassidim, while Besifre meant to say Chassidim Yikor and say Bali Tshuva, because in the Rambam Sefer, when he says Chassidim, it means both, it means Bali Tshuva also. And that's what he doesn't have to mention. So now we get the big picture of how it's a different look on the Rambam. And the Rambam is saying the first part of Simcha Yisayid and saying the names. Then I'm telling you, this is when the Rebbe said the Sikha. I remember when he said the Sikha, it was brilliant. La'achre calls mainly, I mean the Sikha that he said in Toshin Lamadal, because it started in Toshin Tes, but Lamadal never went into this. La'achre calls Zeich move. Now we'll also understand was behemshir to Simchas Beis Hashem, the Rambam Mavaya the Maila for Simcha Shemitzvah B'chal. The other kasha that we didn't answer yet, at the end the Rambam goes into the importance of Simcha Shemitzvah B'chal. And the question was, why does he say it here? Behemshir to Simchas Beis Hasheva. Simchas Seva, the way we learned in the beginning of the Sikha, it's a separate mitzvah. And here we're talking about mitzvah B'chlal. Now we understand. When we learn Nupshat and the Rambam, we understand. The Baal that the Simchas Beis Hasheva is Aisof in the Simchas Yonteh. It's at the Chriv mitzvah from Simchas Yonteh. It's not a separate mitzvah. Simchas Beis Hasheva, what we call, what the Rambam holds, is this is an expression of how they love the mitzvah of Simchas Yonteh. So they did extra because the Torah is madgish. Kumt a chois, it comes out ados the zelber teich v'simcha shemitzvah b'chlal. So basically, what the Rambam is saying by Simcha Beis Hasheva is the same idea as Simcha Shel Mitzvah. What's Simcha Shel Mitzvah? The mitzvah is a mitzvah. You could do the mitzvah like this. You could do it with Simcha. Same thing here. You could do the mitzvah of Simchas Yonteh. And what they did was the mitzvah of Simchas Yonteh with extra Simcha. So it's basically taking an existing mitzvah and having Simcha, which is mamish like a regular Simcha Shel Mitzvah. There's an existing mitzvah, you have a Simcha. So this is the same teich on a Simcha Shel Mitzvah b'chlal. Ahisofev dem iker. It's only an addition to the main thing. In the mikir I say some mitzvah, and in the main thing, which is doing the mitzvah. That's what this case by Simcha Beis Hasheva is. So that's the same thing as Simcha Shel Mitzvah b'chlal. What's Simcha Shel Mitzvah b'chlal? That you have the mitzvah, and in the mitzvah you have something extra. And that's what the Rambam writes. HaSimcha sheyismach odem v'asiyas ha-mitzvah b'avas hakil shetzibah. The simcha that a person is happy when you do the mitzvah. And you love the Eibishter, and you show the love to the Eibishter who commanded you to do the mitzvah. It's mamish basically the same thing. So that's why right after he finishes saying what happened, Simchas Beis Hasheva in the Beis Hamikdash, and the way we learn Pshat that the Rambam holds that this is an extra simcha in the mitzvah, which is existing mitzvah without the simcha, and in that's why he says, now he goes on further. Now the same thing by every simcha shel mitzvah, there's a concept of simcha shel mitzvah. Ober, but, ve'et v'zeh, it's even more. In simcha shel mitzvah b'chlal, is asach aggressor roof to the Simcha Beis Hasheva. When we have Simcha Shel Mitzvah by general, is in something more special than the Simcha that they had in the Beis Hamikdash by Simcha Beis Hasheva. Why? Simchas Beis Hasheva, the Balder Hasheva Matzav Shel Simcha B'Lavocha. He's happy anyway. What was the Simchas Beis Hasheva? People were happy. Simchas Yonteh. There's a mitzvah Simchas Yonteh. Then they added to that special Simcha, so they were happy anyway. Pshitas Atzves is mushal. Certainly, there was not sad. Is nicht schwer peil sein bei sich Aisof in der Matze. If you're happy anyway, you could get happier. You could add more to the way you are. Aber Simcha Shel Mitzvah b'chlal was mefodert bei jeder Mitzvah und jeden Tag. Simcha Shel Mitzvah is expected by every mitzvah, by every day. But was for a Matze soll sein? And what kind of situation? You might be in a bad mood, and still we expect you to do Simcha Shel Mitzvah. That's a big debate. That's harder. When you're simcha anyway, and you add to the simcha, it's a great thing, and it's very important. But when you're doing a mitzvah, any type of it has nothing to do with simcha, and in any mood you are, any way you are, and you're chas v'sholom ba'atzah, you said, and you're going to do simcha, you're going to be happy with the mitzvah. That's even a greater aveda than simcha Beis Hasheva. When the Rebbe brings the Rambam, my dugma from David HaMelech, that's why he brings an example of David, but Mephases and Mechakah Hashem was dancing in front of Hashem. And the Rambam brings this. So like the simcha ba'ala mitzvah to show how much it's supposed to be a simcha. Hagam se shver tzapel zeh basich, even if it's hard. Because by bringing David HaMelech, for David HaMelech was definitely hard. Imagine the king Pasha was jumping up and down like a Meshuggah, way Michal Bashol said to you, you did stupid things. So it was definitely hard. And nevertheless, he did it because Simcha Shel Mitzvah. That shows how important it is to do Simcha Shel Mitzvah, even though it's hard, because we said it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to do Mitzvah. And nevertheless, you got to do it. Now, when we look at the Rambam, he goes from level to level, from the easier to the harder to the harder. Friya bringt the Simchas Yontif B'chlal. First, the Rambam talks about B'chlal, the Simchas Yontif. He says this logic called Ameya, this mitzvah smear, and all the famous mitzvah to be happy. No, the regular Simcha from Chag HaSukkos is a hecher aveda. Then he says there's something more. Chag HaSukkos, you have to be the Simcha. On top of that Simcha, you have to be more. Why are you extra happy? Because you love the mitzvah of Simcha, and here you want to show your love because the Torah stressed extra the mitzvah. So that's even on top of the regular Simchas Yom. And then he says, I'm telling you, you have to be Simchas Mechlal, but it's a schwerer, and Aveda Gdela, this is even harder. So he's going from one level to another level. And the Rebbe said, this is a lesson for Geil Apel. Ayid can doch by sich trachten, Ayid could think to himself, wie schleim in the text is man Simchas Sein, when you're in the middle of Sukkot, is man Simchas Sein, the time of happiness. You could bring out Simcha because this is as man Simchas Sein. Aber wie kann bei sich peilen zu sein bei Simcha echt noch dem Zwan am Gipfel? How could he be the Simcha? How could he peil on himself to be the Simcha after the special time? Mesugel. It's a special auspicious time. Yemes Zakoyin, special days for Simcha. When it's after those special days. So the Rambam says no. As noch der Simcha for Simcha v'Sasheva. After he talks about Simcha v'Sasheva, which is a higher level of Simcha, heb sich erst on the Aveda Gdela v'Simcha. After you finish with Sukkot, now you could have Simcha Shel Mitzvah, and now starts this big Aveda. Warum ständig afil b'Meisachel, because steady, constantly, even in the weekdays, is jeder Knuff von Ayiden verbunden mit Aveda Hashem. When we say Simcha Shel Mitzvah, you have to serve Hashem. It's not only when you actually do a mitzvah. Every second, every movement you make is Avodas Hashem. She's a mitzvah kipshute or push it. It's push it. You're doing a mitzvah. But even the moment we're not doing a mitzvah, or there's a prat from Mechom Masech L'Shem Shemayim, you're doing other things, and it says that whatever you do should be L'Shem Shemayim. So every movement you make is a mitzvah, is Avodas Hashem. And all your ways, your own things that you do, which is not a mitzvah, you should know Hashem. Darf das geben, getan werden besimcha, mishkos if this Hashem besimcha. Every second it's Avodas Hashem, you have to do it besimcha because the pasuk says serve Hashem besimcha in every moment. Nagam as Chazal sagen, also lodem sheyimalas take be'elam hazeh. Even though the Chazal say a person should not laugh fully in this world till Mashiach comes, but simcha shel mitzvah is adarabe achiv v'nayin nachrochim. But it doesn't include simcha shel mitzvah. You shouldn't laugh, stamazeh. But simcha shel mitzvah, that's a must. It's a chiyuv. You're happy, you're smiling in simcha of the mitzvah. This makes the Eibishter smile. There's a posuk that says that when the Goyim are trying to plot against the Eden, the Eibishter who sits in Shemayim laughs. So when you laugh and you're happy, so it causes the Eibishter Yitzchak. Yitzchak from the Allah of Asfil Chas v'Sholem Tzidkin Eden, he laughs at all those who try Chas v'Sholem to pressure Eden, oppress Eden. He's some Kima Yud. Till we'll get to the fulfillment of the promise. Oz Yimoles Chek Pinadem, by Mashiach will come, we'll have the full laughter. And that'll be the Bias Mashiach that came of the Korid Mamish. Okay, Baruch Hashem, like I said, this is a special sikha. This is